Well, hello and welcome to the stream. Let's go ahead and see what we can get into. We're going to do a little of gods and robots, and this is Ancient Dreams of Technology. And this is Adrianne Maynard. And this is about talking about gods and robots and myths and machines of technology past. Enjoy.
So you could say I'm a historian of ancient curiosity. I'm seeking the first inklings of the scientific impulse. For my book, Gods and Robots, I asked who first imagined robots, automatons, self-moving devices. Most historians would trace the first automatons to the Middle Ages with the clockwork mechanisms, but I wondered the ideas, the concepts of automatons, creating animated statues, self-moving devices. Could those ideas have been imagined long before the technology existed, made them possible? I should warn you that some philosophers of science actually claim no one in antiquity could imagine automatons until the technology already existed. They're misinformed. Where does innovation come from if it doesn't come from imagining what doesn't already exist? And it turns out that as early as the time of Homer, more than 2,500 years ago, the Greeks were imagining, now in myth, how one might fabricate artificial life, self-living devices, animated beings, artificial beings. These entities were always described as products of technology. I'm not talking about lifeless objects or inert matter that's brought to us objects, natural spell, or just a God's command. The process that the Greeks imagined for these entities could be called biotechne, ancient Greek for life through craft. That's the root of our word biotechnology. Now, automatons that were always described as made, not born, manufactured, not produced biologically. Here are some myths that I think we're all probably pretty familiar with, and just not used to looking for automatons. So I'm going to be talking about Jason and the Argonauts, the fire bringer Prometheus, and Pandora. These remarkable tales about creating artificial life were ancient thought experiments about what could be achieved if only you had the creativity and the powers of a god or the gods. And these myths were taken seriously by philosophers and playwrights in antiquity as ways to think about trying to imitate and improve or surpass nature. And what's interesting for us tonight is that they foreshadow some of the doubts and fears that robotics and AI technology are facing today. One, rising anxiety. Today is the potential for totalitarian oppression. Maybe some of you read the article by Yuval Harari, Why Technology Changes Tyranny. He predicted AI will empower human tyrants to impose ever greater totalitarianism with ever greater ease. That association between technology and tyranny that might seem like a very modern concept, but I'm here to tell you that it's a very old subject. I found that the myths about artificial life have a striking feature in common. All of the automatons and self-living devices are deployed by those with supreme power, gods, Zeus, or kings. So as early as Homer, and we're talking about 750 BC, people were imagining robotic servants, lifelike replicas of humans and animals, and even AI. Most of these were made by Hephaestus, the god of technology and inventions. The only god of job is the only god of sweats. He's always shown at work in his forms of axiom. And he has powerful policies, a brilliant president of techno world. Homer's Iliad describes how Hephaestus constructed a set of automatic bellows for his void. These bellows could blow or blast And according to his needs in his forge, so he didn't need to adjust them. They could anticipate what he needed. Augustus also built a set of automatic gates for heavens so that they could open and close at the approach of the gods' chariots. The first automatic garage doors, you might say. I don't want to draw any direct lines from antiquity to today's inventions, but you just can't help thinking of these things. Next, he fabricated a fleet of self-driving delivery carts that brought nectar and ambrosia to the gods' banquets, and then they returned when they were back. I think this most amazing invention with a crew of female androids made of gold. I wish I had an ancient picture of them. These would have to do. They served as his personal assistants, and they moved around efficiently to and fro in his workshop. Homer describes these golden maidens, as he said that they looked like real young women, just like real young women. And they were endowed with strength, reason, and mind, but even more mind-blowing. He says they were equipped with all the knowledge of the gods. All the knowledge of the gods. That's quite a David Delp. You don't need that much. You don't need that much knowledge, but who knows? You never know, you might. But it does make you think when you think over AI. These are labor-saving devices that are intelligent machines, and they were all made for the benefit of the gods and goddesses. And when they're confined to the realm of the heavens, Hephaestus's inventions are benign, they're charming, they're harmless. But when such things are sent down to earth, that's when trouble starts. Violence and suffering follow. Let's consider the fate of Prometheus. I'm sure you all remember. He stole divine fire, a technology of fire, to help human beings. And in the myth, Zeus, the all-powerful king of gods and man, was a vindictive tyrant. To punish Prometheus, he came into a mountain, and then he ordered Hephaestus, and we hear that it was against Hephaestus' will that it's ordered to do this, to forge a bronze eagle to torment Prometheus. And Zeus's eagle was imagined as a metallic raptor that arrived like clockwork each day, almost drone-like. In the Argonautica, the epic poem of Jason the Argonauts, the sailors observed the eagle's machine-like movements. And I'll just quote from the Argonautica. Each afternoon, the glowing eagle flew over our ship with a loud whirring noise, and we saw how the feathers of each wing rose and fell, moved up and down like a bank of polished oars. Zeus, of course, always vindictive, he took vicious revenge on humankind for accepting the gift of stolen life. He commanded Hephaestus to construct a ravishing and seductive artificial young woman. And Zeus's specifications were it should be evil disguised as beauty. You all know who it was. It was Pandora. Probably not the Pandora of the fairy tales of she was not just an innocent young woman. Who was described this female android as made, not born. So she's a technological product. She was to be sent to Earth with a sealed jar that was filled with misfortunes and suffering to plague humans for eternity. And in the myth, here we see a race painting of Zeus admiring Pandora before he sends her down to Earth. And in the myth, we hear that Zeus took sadistic glee in his plan. It was said that he laughed out loud as he admired Pandora's gift for humanity. So she was really a fembot with one mission on Earth, to assimilate herself into human society and then release, unseal that jar, the swarm of evils that had come out and plague humankind. And Zeus ordered his messenger Hermes to escort Pandora to Earth. There's an interesting vase painting, and I'll put a picture of it that shows Zeus and Hermes exchanging a sly smile as they about to inflict Pandora on Earth. Well, Hermes took Pandora down to Earth and gave her as a bride to a happy-go-lucky guy named Epimetheus. Epimetheus was Prometheus's brother, and Prometheus warned Epimetheus not to accept the dangerous gift from Zeus. But Epimetheus was dazzled by Pandora. He went for the short-term gains, and we hear from the poets only later did he realize his terrible error after she opened the door. And I just want to point out the name Prometheus in ancient Greek, it means forethought. And Epimetheus, it means hindsight. Epimetheus is a perfect patsy for Zeus's cunning trick. It's a very famous vase showing Pandora being prepared for her mission. And the artist, you can see all the figures are really moving around, the actor. Pandora's standing there stiffly like a sort of statue or a doll. She has an uncanny smile on her face as she's being prepared for her assignment on Earth. And here's a close-up of that. I think Pandora's kind of eerily similar to the evil robot Maria in the great silent film Metropolis. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend this film. It's 1927 silent film. It was made just a few years after the invention of the word robot, and already in 1927, people were imagining a future techno dystopia where the rich ruling class oppressed the miserable workers of automation and robots. In the Greek myths, as I noted, Hephaestus's automatons are harmless as long as they're confined to the realm of the gods. So these stories seem to be telling us that intelligent machines like self-moving cars and old servants, they're fun to imagine as thought experiments, but the myths imply that such things can be pretty dangerous and destructive in the real world of humans. Now, another ancient myth tells how Hephaestus forged the first bronze robot, and I can't resist showing hearing Hausen's fabulous image of Talos, the giant bronze robot. The automaton was called Talos, and it was made for King Minos, who ruled Crete with an iron hand. So Talos was a killer robot who was intended to defend the island kingdom of King Minos, and he was programmed to spot strangers, spot anyone coming ashore, and actually to pick up and hurl boulders at ships to sink them. And the coins of ancient Crete boasted about that capability of Talos. Now, should anyone make it ashore in close combat, this bronze robot could heat his body red hot, grab up a victim, hug them to his chest, and roast them alive. This mirror shows that capability. So Talos was imagined as a kind of cyborg, half human, half machine. He's able to carry out complex activities, and he fits the definition of robot in a way because we know details about his inner workings, and he even has a power source. Talos, we're told, had a single tube or a conduit that went from his head to his feet. And in that tube or conduit pulsed ichor. Ichor is the life fluid of the immortal gods. That's his power source. The entire Viva system is sealed. The whole system is sealed with a bronze bolt on his ankle. When they dropped anchor in Crete, Jason the Argonauts, it looked like they were doomed to be Talos' next victims. But luckily for them, they had the sorceress Medea along with them, and she figured out how to destroy Talos. She realized that if you remove the bronze bolt in the robot's ankle, his power source would drain out. And ancient Greek base claims that from 2,500 years ago showed Jason using a tool to remove the bolt. This is an example. this power source, ichor, then we're told, flowed out like molten bread. It's a kind of technological description. The great robot of King Minos toppled over and expired. So not only was Talos created with technology, but he was taken down with technology. Technology was required to dismantle. And it's interesting that the ancient Greek artists really emphasized the sort of human-like traits of this bronze machine and his unfair death. I mean, after all, he's killed just while he's doing his job, right? He's doing his job for the tyrant king. And if you look closely at this face painting, you can see that the artist has painted a teardrop on the robot's cheek. Kind of reminds you of Hal, the death of Hal in 2001. Medea also figured out how to overcome yet another set of deadly automatons forged by Hephaestus for yet another king who wanted Jason dead. This king ordered Jason to carry out two impossible tasks. First, he had to yoke a pair of bronze, fire-breathing bulls and then plow a field with these animated bronze oxen. And then he had to defeat the invincible army of robot-like warriors that would spring up from the plowed field. And the evil king was confident that if either Jason could somehow avoid being burned to death by the robo-bulls, he and his men would be slaughtered by the armed android screaming out from the field. Well, Medea created a special drug to give Jason superpowers to wrangle the bronze bulls, so he could fly on the field without being incinerated. And then at nightfall, the dreadful warriors in bronze armor began to emerge from that field. This is a medieval image, but I think it's pretty good. Techno wizard Medea to the rescue again. Now, Medea, you really want her on your side if you're going to be facing these automatons. She's an ancient hacker. She figures out the vulnerable points, the weak points, and she exploits them. She knew that those automatons or unnatural soldiers were essentially hardwired to attack. She cleverly hacked the coding imprinted in the soldiers. What she did, she told Jason to throw some stones into their midst, into their ranks, and that would trigger a fatal domino effect, a sort of cascade. That the fact they would sense the blows on their shields, and then they turn immediately to the person closest to them, and they turn on each other, and a frenzy of confusion ensues, and then Jason organized in Russia and finished them off, and then escaped the evil king's plot. Well, notice that in all of these myths, the machines of malice belong to tyrannical rulers, whether it's Zeus or mythical kings. They used automatons to wield absolute power to torture or to kill. So was this use of biotechnology, is it only an imaginary feature of cruel tyrants in mythology? What about real life? What about the real world? Did any actual tyrants deploy real automatons and machines in historical times? Yes, they did. In fact, the autocratic fascination with automatons as instruments of power was not just a theme in the classical myths. Like their counterparts in the myths, the autocratic rulers, many of them, I found quite a few examples, commissioned animated statues and machines to inflict pain and death. And this was documented as early as the 6th century BC. And I don't know if I should give a trigger warning. Some of the stories are pretty grim. The first example, historical example, involves a fiery bronze bull to incinerate victims. Now, was it inspired by the bronze robot Talos? Heating his body red hot, or maybe the fire-breathing bulls in the myth, and that's unknown. This particular deadly bronze bull belonged to the cold-blooded tyrant named Polaris of Sicily, and he became absolute dictator of the island in 570 BC. During his reign of terror, a brilliant sculptor named Peraleus presented King Polaris with the statue of a bull so true to life it seemed to breathe. Now, I want to note here that ancient artists were capable of making incredibly realistic sculptures of people and animals. Uh, these are all real examples of bronze statues from antiquity with inlaid eyes and pupils, inlaid fingernails, teeth, and eyelashes. And remember, they weren't just bronze like these. They were painted realistically with natural looking paint that actually contained wax and pigments, so that they really looked real. Some of them were animated, some could blink, they could turn their heads, they could move their arms, and some could make sounds. Parallaeus, the craftsman, explained to the king that this hollow bronze bowl was a torture device. Just lock someone inside and build a fire under it. As the bull's body heats up, the man goes to death, he said. Parallaeus then described a fiendish system of tubes that he had installed in the bull's interior. And these tubes directed smoke and flames to come out of the bull's nostrils, and the pipes amplified the victim's shrieks through the bull's mouth. It gave the impression of a real bellowing, fire-breathing bull like those in the death piece of the Argonauts. And the statue is essentially animated by the human being trapped inside and the apparatus inside. King was impressed. He asked for a demonstration. As soon as Parallaeus crawled inside to yell into the pipes, Polaris locked the trap door and rose to dismiss. And there would be many more. Now, Polaris was detested for his brutality, and this story is told by many historians. Many of them actually saw the bull afterwards, so it really did exist. He was detested for his brutality. He was finally overthrown after about 20 years, but that diabolical bronze bull lived on, not just in stories, but physically. More than 300 years later, during the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca, invaded Sicily during the First Punic War. He plundered the treasures of Sicily, and one of his prizes was the notorious bronze bull. He shipped it to Carthage, across the Mediterranean into Tunisia. The bull remained in Carthage for another 100 years. Now, we can only guess how the bull served the rulers of Carthage, but I will remind you that the Carthaginians were reported to sacrifice their children in a furnace shaped like their god. And the Roman general Scipio finally defeated Carthage in 146 BC. He recovered the bronze bull and he shipped it back to Sicily. And he set it up as a monument, he said, to the viciousness of tyrants like Polaris. The message is trust the Romans. We weren't any more tyrants like this. The sculptor, Parallaeus, was also castigated for using his skills to make such a project for a tyrant. Polaris, sorry to say, was not the only malicious ruler to own a realistic statue that was brought to life by the screams of the burning victim. Sicily, it turns out, was a hotbed of such devices. There were many others. Another Sicilian king burned people inside a giant bronze statue of a man. Yet another king in Sicily had a realistic bronze stallion that he used for the same purposes. And these kings were known to offer rewards to artisans and inventors for making novel torture machines. And I just want to point out that novel machines of war were also rewarded by powerful kings. In 400 BC, the tyrant Dionysius of Syracuse, Sicily again, invited inventors to a contest to make advanced weapons. And that competition is what resulted in the first mechanized catapults, taking warfare to new levels of killing. Rewards and prizes started attracting military engineers and inventors to the courts of Philip II of of Macedonia, Alexander's father, Demetrius Polynosites, also of Macedonia, and Mithridates the Great of Pontus. The brilliant scientist Archimedes also devised many ingenious war machines for Sicily. You can see an example there on the right, lower right, a giant claw that would pick up ships and sink them. And so while military engineers were developing crossbow artillery and powerful torsion catapults in the 4th and 3rd centuries, other engineers and inventors were flocking to Alexandria, Egypt. Alexandria, Egypt at that time was the Silicon Valley of antiquity. That had a museum, the library, and inventors actually designed and constructed a great variety of self-moving devices, self-driving theaters, complex automatons, some of them miniature, some of them colossal, using mechanics, and they even have plans to use magnetism. King Ptolemy II of Alexandria commissioned their most advanced designs for his magnificent spectacles in Alexandria. His grand procession of 279 BC, it was just an outrageous parade of stunning engineering marvels that wound through the streets for days, to the streets of Alexandria in this lower right here. And there were many monumental, lifelike, animated statues of gods and goddesses, each on carts pulled by 300 men. On one cart, for example, sat a colossal 15-foot tall goddess. She was dressed in real silk clothing, sitting there regally on her throne, and then periodically along the route of the parade, this automaton stood up, poured a jug of milk into a large bowl, and then sat down again. All very stately manner. During his reign, King Ptolemy executed many members of his family and his political enemies. He declared himself a god, but his automatons, as far as we know, were non-violent. So those grandiose spectacles of technology were intended to drive home this godlike absolute power. Well, history records another dictator who demonstrated his iron rule in another parade with another giant self-moving automaton. After the Macedonians crushed democratic Athens, they set up the brutal tyrant Demetrius to rule the city. He destroyed the democracy, and he commissioned a giant animatronic snail. Now, I hear there's someone here who has a snail that he drives around town. So, what a coincidence! I guess snails have been automatic. Automaton snails have been for centuries, millennia. He set this great snail to crawl at the head of Athens' most sacred procession. And as the realistic giant snail inched along the route, it even oozed a trail of slime along the street. Now you might ask, why make a giant self-moving gastropod? Snails were considered slow. Is this how your vehicle works? No, probably not. This is a design from an engineer in Amsterdam trying to figure out how that giant snail. But in antiquity, snails were considered slow, clumsy, lowly creatures. To drive home the insult, right behind that giant snail came a troop of asses. The grotesque spectacle was a dramatic and very public way to humiliate and demoralize defeated citizens of Athens, once so celebrated for their quick action and intelligence. Demetrius, what happened to him? He was later expelled from Athens. All 360 of his statues to himself were smashed, and it was reported that he died of a venomous snake bite. Meanwhile, in Sparta, in 207 BC, the ruthless dictator Nabis seized power. The reign of Nabis and his wife, Apega, was long remembered for extortion, torture, and executions of masses of their subjects. Apega was said to far surpass her husband in cruelty and murder. And maybe that's why Nabis decided to fabricate or commission a mechanical facsimile of Apega, a machine that resembled the queen with extraordinary fidelity. The robotic replica wore Apega's finery and probably had a lifelike wax or maybe a plaster cast painted of Apega's own face. Someone on YouTube, some engineers have actually recreated this terrible device. Nabis would summon citizens of Sparta, ply them with wine to get them drunk, and then demand their money and their property. And if they refused, he would say, "Perhaps my queen Apega will be more persuasive." The man was then taken to meet the fake Apega, and when he reached out and touched or took her hand, the robot stood up, triggering springs to raise her arms, which suddenly grabbed the victim, and under her fancy clothing, the body was studded with iron spikes. Levers and ratchets tightened Apega's deadly embrace, drawing the victim closer and driving the spikes deeper. With this impaling device in the form of his wife, historians wrote that Nabis destroyed many men in Sparta. After 17 years, the tyrant Nabis was finally assassinated. And I'm noticing they all come to a bad end, these tyrants. So there's some good news here. It's often said that robots fulfill three functions: labor, sex, and spectacle or entertainment. And the ancient Greeks had those covered. But the examples of automatons in myth and history also suggest that maybe we should add power as another function. The drive to dominate and exert power led tyrants of myth and historical times to seek and commission nefarious technology. Now, at this point, you might be wondering if I cherry-picked examples of the Greek rulers using automatons for harm of their myths. If you ask me later in the Q&A, as far as I know, there are two exceptions. One from myth and one from historical times. As we saw, some of the historical automatons for inflicting harm do seem to somehow replicate or echo elements from the automatons of myth. And I'm thinking of those fiery bronze bulls and the bronze robots. Talos' burning embrace, kind of a perversion of human war. You can't really prove which way the causal arrow goes. Can't prove that the myths inspired the tyrants or their engineers, but it is a question that comes to mind. It has been suggested that the spiked animated figure of Apega in Sparta might have inspired the notorious medieval torture device. I'm sure you're thinking of the Iron Maiden. I believe that the Iron Maiden was never actually made or used, but the idea and the realm had come from Apega. And we do know that the myth of Talos, the automated bronze guardian of King Minos, that did inspire ideas of robotic, merciless iron knights in the Middle Ages. And here's Leonardo da Vinci's model. In fact, military engineers continue to be fascinated with the bronze guardian robot right up to the present day. It's also interesting, just as a side note, that security companies sometimes call themselves Talos. I think Cisco's security division is called Talos. So they also know the name. In the 1950s, the first surface-to-air naval missiles were named Talos rockets, consciously after them. And there's cruel irony in the name of the latest military drones made by Elbit Systems to rain death in the Middle East. They're named Hermes after the sly messenger, the trickster messenger of the sadistic god Zeus, who did deliver Pandora to destruction of mortals. And as we speak, Pentagon scientists working with Special Ops Command and DARPA are developing a futuristic weaponized and AI-enhanced exoskeleton armor for soldiers, and they're actively soliciting designs and ideas from tech inventors. And guess what they named the suit? TALOS, so that they could have the acronym tag. Well, in the myths, the tyrant god Zeus simply commanded Hephaestus to make machines that he used against humanity. In historical instances, genius craftsmen offered their work to powerful kings for rewards, and other autocrats held contests, much like DARPA does today. We know that scientists today are designing AI and robotic technologies for powerful corporations, the military, and for totalitarian states. They present many of those innovations to the public as only beneficial, such as just examples from the media: lip reading AI, GPS location services, facial recognition, biometric surveillance, smart laptops like in Hong Kong, super soldiers, driverless vehicles, and drones. I know everyone here can imagine driverless purposes. Well, to conclude, it might seem ironic or strange here at the Long Now that I'm asking you to time travel back more than 2,700 years, but now we do know that tech and tyranny have been linked for millennia. Which way does the causal arrow go? That's debatable. People have talked about that, but I think at this point it seems like the link itself might be the more pressing question. AI is advancing at warp speed. It's outstripping our ability to work out the ethical issues. And that unknowable black box problem of AI seems to loom like Pandora's great ball sealed jar. If there is a message from antiquity, it seems to be, will we be like short-sighted Prometheus, who was dazzled by Pandora, or can we be more like Prometheus, using our imagination and foresight to avoid turning over the future to tyranny and evil?
Hey everyone. There. We just met a couple of weeks ago, so it's really it was really well timed. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I had just one thought. I don't know if I suspect there's other people out here that saying that Pandora was just. I never knew that Pandora was an invented, crafted creature. And I'm kind of interested in why I didn't know that. And whether there's an interesting story to be told about how that figure changed since the fact that she was invented and the whole thing was planned from the get-go and it wasn't her fault. Seems like a significant shift from the story that I knew.
And many people have pointed out that it reminds them of Eve. I don't personally know how the story evolved from antiquity through the Middle Ages to this fairy tale European version that we know, but there is a book by Panofsky called The Evolution of the Myth of Pandora. So someone has worked on that problem. But one thing about the myth of Pandora that really interests me is the last thing that's in the jar. Oh, and it was a jar, a sealed jar in antiquity, and a mistranslation in the Renaissance made it into a box. So I mistranslated it into a box, and But all the artists show Pandora reeling back in horror and then swarm of evils coming out that because she was such an innocent girl with a tragic case of curiosity, but that's not the story at all. And the last thing in the box is it must give hope. And all the fairy tale images show hope as a fairy who is bringing comfort to humankind because of all this disaster that has been unleashed upon them. That's not in the original story either. In antiquity, hope was not a good thing. Blind hope was philosophers and playwrights have debated since antiquity. Was hope the worst or the best thing in Pandora's box? And there are even some ancient artists that show Pandora personified as a young woman popping up out of Pandora's jar. She's got a crooked, sly smile on her face, and she's mocking you for believing that hope is the hope.
It's that ambiguity seems to get to the heart of the whole problem. I mean, tonight you just talked about Greek examples. In the book, you also talk about examples from the East and from other cultures. So this is not the only place that we find this anticipation of atonement, either in myth or in actual technologies. But there does seem to be something specific about the evolution of many things in Greece that involves something you touched on briefly, which is the power of similitude. You know, this is a moment if you look at earlier Attic forms of statues, or if you look at Egyptian statues, there's an obvious distance between that and verisimilitude of the human body. And we really see that in art history. It does seem to be different. So my question is I'm wondering if you could connect that to an issue that you do talk about also in your book that I think we can all enjoy today, which is the uncanny valley.
Absolutely.
So it seems like the Greeks sort of discovered the uncanny valley in objects in a way maybe that was sort of original to their artistic exploration.
Absolutely. As I was reading the descriptions in Homer, in both the Iliad and the Odyssey, of people encountering very realistic animated statues, living statues, I call them. I realized that although we think of the uncanny valley as totally modern, it was invented in I think 1970. And also Warren, the robotics engineer. What's interesting is he invented it when he was looking at prosthetics. Apparently, is what made him get that uncanny valley feeling, and he identified it and extrapolated to robots. But Homer describes Odysseus and various other characters encountering hyper-realistic paintings that seem to move and have sound, almost described like movies. And they feel a very disturbed, mixed ambivalence of absolute fascination, sort of morbid fascination and awe. And it's obviously the uncanny valley. If you think of the slide that I showed, it says hyper-realistic statues. Think of them, and they're life size and they're painted, and they are up in temples, and they have electric lights. So when you see them, they're in a dark temple. Maybe you'll get by, maybe outside lit by moonlight and in the dark, or just with an oil lamp flickering. And they look like they're moving about to breathe. So the uncanny valley sensation goes all the way up to antiquity, and not probably just a piece. And there was an example of a Chinese inventor who invented an atomic time to show it to the and it would move and dance and act like a regular person, and everybody was amused until the automaton winked at one of his wives. And the emperor said, off with his head, and the inventor, and he goes, wait, no, it's I made it. And he opened it up and showed that every organ was an exact replica of a human anatomy. So the Chinese were into making really unnaturally real, hyper-real, surreal replicas. as well.
I think you brought up the emotions here. You know, we're talking about the uncanny valley and the mixture, the strange mixture of awe and wonder. And wonder is a very important feature of Greek thought, of Greek philosophy. Philosophy begins in wonder, and then yet there's this element of dread or a bit of horror to it. And this, to me, connects us to my next question, which is that when we think about this link between power and automata, that the bronze bowl that roasts people alive isn't just, you know, a bowl that roasts people alive. It's also a bronze bowl. So there's some way in which power is using not just a torture device, which inflicts physical suffering, but there's something about controlling the imagination or controlling our reaction to things that have similitude that seems to be part of that gesture of power that you're really pointing to in a really interesting way. So I just want to kind of push you a little bit more to think about what is that, if robots are not just for labor, for sex, and for entertainment, and they're for power, what is it? How is tyranny enhanced by the similitude, by the fact that it looks like something?
Well, the descriptions of Ptolemy II, this grand discussion, it gave the impression that the gods are on his side, that he could have living images, almost, living statues of the gods in his creating. It seems to give their approval to all of his policies and his reign. So I think that he was also very interested in terms of his magnetism. He married his sister, and when she died unexpectedly, he made her into a goddess, and he had all these inventors working on trying to make a statue of this new goddess that he was going to bring to Alexandria, his sister, wife. She was going to be floating in midair in a temple because she would be a realistic statue of her. And if you see statues of his wife, they are just shockingly realistic and sexy. And so this statue is going to hang there in midair with a magnetic roof and an iron bar inside the statue. Of course, that's impossible because of Earnshaw's law or something. It doesn't happen until electromagnetism. But he was the first to try to use that. It would just show incredible power and convince people that not only was he a god, he declared himself a god, he declared his wife gods. So I think that's part of the power. Yeah.
Well, I think keep asking you questions, but I suspect there's going to be some out there. Joe, you got something for me?
Yes, indeed. We're first going to start with one from our online audience.
Wow. I didn't know there was an online.
Oh, indeed. You mentioned that there were two examples that were not dead. Yeah. More about.
Yes, benevolent examples, similar with power. So, I'll talk about the mythological example that I found. When Odysseus is trying to get home after the Trojan War, that's what the Odyssey is all about. He's been at the Trojan War, it's an event of the Trojan War, which lasted 10 years. He's been wandering for 10 years, he can't get home. He wants to get back to his native island and his family. And he needs all these people that restrain him. But moving into the books, he goes to a mysteriously advanced society called Phaeacia, and it's run by a king alchemist who asks him his story, and Odysseus says, I just want to get home so badly, and I'm longing for my life. And the king says, oh, I'll send you home on one of my ships. I have a fleet of ships that require no rowers, no captains, no pilots, no navigators. They're navigated by thought alone. All you need to do is give the ship your destination, and it will devise the route. It's not affected by storm or currents. Take you home and return to me the next day. And you can't help but think of something that's got a vast archive of navigational charts of the known world, and it will devise the route. And it has a happy ending. Odysseus gets home. None of that happens. That's wonderful. It's the only story I know from myth of an automaton that didn't cause trouble to humans on Earth. So that's a mythological example. And the historical example comes from the 4th century BC, in the time of Plato. In fact, it involves a friend of Plato named Archytas, who was a mechanical engineer. He wrote a lot of treatises. They're all lost, unfortunately, but we have quotations from his treatises, and they were described. So he was a serious inventor of mechanical devices. He was also a statesman in the Greek colony of Tarentum. And he invented the first model of a bird, a realistic model of a bird that could fly. And it flew a few feet or yards, and then it had to be reset. Today's engineers think that it might have been steam driven somehow. That's the first automaton that we know of that flew is totally benign. And he was also, according to Aristotle, the inventor of children's toys that were mechanical. One of them was a sort of clacking thing that you can buy them now. It's a toy that I can't describe it. I have a slide of it. I thought of buying one on Amazon and showing it to them. It's a kid's toy that's mechanical engineering. And he made these benign things just to teach people, educate them about the physics of mechanical engineering. So he was benign. And I will point out, he was not a tyrant because he was a politician in a democracy. Interesting.
So I have a quick comment and then a question. Thanks for teasing out the question of Prometheus. I also had no idea, the original story and the original vision of what hope was, which I would, as a comment, just point out is pervasive at the moment. And that's the example of the way we talk about climate, we can't even look at the thing because we think about hope. So there's a real lesson of that. So thank you. My question today, even there was an article in the paper about the Chinese company that's built a drone with a machine gun and being able to sell it on the market to whoever wants it. And so I'm interested in this idea that the gods have these things, but it's a problem because down to earth. And so my question is, what does that bring to you for examples of that problem in ancient times? What are your thoughts about what it means for today?
I don't know of any Greek examples of drone-like entities, but I can hear you.
So well, it's sort of recordings. I meant more the idea of the power of these things reaching outside of those who have power, the gods or the tyrants.
Oh, absolutely.
What happens when these technologies reach them? That's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that in Hindu mythology, gods had really cosmic weapons that would rain death from the skies. And so just that whole idea of ambush or attack from the skies is no defense. And it seems like a godlike power. So I don't know what more to say about it, but it's certainly a pretty development.
So one question about, you mentioned two automatons. One was the bronze bull. The other one, I believe, was the image of the wife that hugs people to death. How are those controlled? Do you know how the automation work with the eyes, the bull, and things like that?
All we know is about the bronze bull of King Phalaris. The details that we know are the ones that I gave you. The bronze bulls that were made by Hephaestus, we don't have any further details except that they were realistic and they were animated somehow. We know that Hephaestus was a technician, and we do have the details of the inner workings of Telos. which is ironic since that's the oldest example we have of an automaton, and we have the most details about it. You just have to really keep in mind how much has been lost from antiquity. We only have the texts or fragments that have survived. So much has been lost, and so much artwork has been lost. We have a lot of details from the artwork. We know that Talos was imagined as a technological being because of those old base games that show Jason using a tool. It's very rare. I don't think there are very many base games that show someone using a tool in that way. So there's a lot that's lost. We don't know about the detail.
So firstly, I wanted to thank you because this talk is such a wonderful example of how critically important it is that people study humanities and think about ancient history and how these disciplines that we think of as maybe unrelated are so deeply related. Many people are just curious and going back to ancient times, but I have two unrelated questions. The first is sort of because it's such a common topic for now is whether these automatons and automated sort of applications, whether the balance of their benefits to humanity versus their use in the power application based on what we've seen in history, where we have these sparse examples of their beneficial use and many examples of their power use. And the second one is the application that we talked about, which is sex, and whether there would be examples of that.
Well, I can think of some beneficial machines used in Democratic Athens. They had a voting machine and a lottery, sort of a lottery machine. So those were beneficial. And they also had machines for stagecraft. It's interesting that the democracy has been on this issue. Now for sex and automatons. Well, first of all, the story of Pandora. She is made to be an extremely seductive, ravishing young woman, and all of the gods give her attributes as she's being created. So someone gives her persuasion, and another one gives her beauty, and Hermes, that sly trickster god, he gives her the soul of a female dog. So we don't hear about the sex between Epimetheus and Pandora. She sort of just disappears after she's carried out her mission on Earth. But the Roman poet Ovid imagined that they did have sex and that she was so lifelike that she gave birth to a baby boy or a girl. Which is, I think, is sort of interesting since that's sort of the theme of the second Blade Runner, whether or not automatons become that real. And then, of course, there's the story of Daedalus making that artificial cow that was so realistic. He even used the cow hide of cows that were in the bull's pasture. He made that artificial cow so that the queen Pasiphae, who was married to King Minos, the tyrant of Crete, she cursed her husband, and we don't know the reason, but she gave him a particularly diabolical magical spell. She was another witch. So that every time he ejaculated spiders and scorpions. So he was having a hard time in life. Zeus was a patron of King Minos, and so he put a curse on Pasiphae and made her fall in love with the most magnificent bull in King Minos' court. And so she begged Daedalus, this craftsman, to make her a cow so she could crawl inside and have sex with the bull. And so we have that. Okay. And then we have even more. That story, right? That once again is a kind of romantic story. It's supposed to be romantic. Pygmalion makes this beautiful statue of a young woman and prays to the gods and she comes alive. If you read the story, it's really creepy. I mean, the villain is a guy who hates real women. They're just too real for him. And so he makes his ideal woman a virgin, beautiful, and he takes that statue to bed every night. And we have dozens of stories of men falling in love with realistic statues from that time period. The Greeks even had a name for it. Agomophilia means statue lust. And this that uncanny valley right there. I mean, these guys would sneak into temples at night and have sex with, especially statues of Aphrodite because they were so beautiful. And leave evidence of their shocking crimes that we found in the morning. So, I should have given it to you for that.
The more things age. You have another question for me?
Hi.
Sorry.
Thank you for your presentation. So I think I'm more serious.
Yes.
I'm ready. I was thinking about another Prometheus Prometheus constructing the and I wonder how your reading of these myths of automata might be read considering the human as potential for automata. On the other side of that, of course, recognizing that these gods are human created, you could bring in your concept of power, the importance of power in that as well.
Absolutely. That's a philosophical question. And this picture that's up here right now is Prometheus building the first human from scratch. He's starting with the framework. He's starting with the skeleton as the framework, and then he'll add the flesh and the sinew and all organs. And he's using tools to do it. So are we all just puppets of gods? I think Plato was maybe one of the first to bring that question up. One of his dialogues, he says, let's imagine that we're all just puppets of gods, superior beings. So, yeah, I think that's certainly shows power.
So my question relates to basically the authors of these stories, right? And ancient stories are not only about history, they usually also entail some sort of educational purpose and have moral subline or subtext. Are there any references from these ancient authors that tell us how to deal with this?
How to live with it.
How to deal with it, actually, how to react to it? Shall we now destroy technology? Shall we more or less try to technology to the masses? Or what's the lesson to be learned from the perspective, maybe? The authors.
That's an interesting question. It makes me think of Aristotle, who knew all these myths, of course, and he was justifying slavery in one of his treatises. And it's a really bad defense of slavery, and everyone agrees that it doesn't have a very rational defense of slavery. But right in the middle of his defense of slavery, in his opinions on law slave, he just goes off onto this thought experiment and says, oh, now what if we had automatons like Hephaestus made for the gods? What if we had looms that could weave on their own? What if we had instruments, musical instruments that could play themselves? Well, we wouldn't need slaves. And then he just drops it and goes back. Why didn't he continue that train of thought? That would have been quite interesting. But at least he's musing on the economic and social ramifications of automatons imagining and trying to think what would happen if we had to see what happens. And the fact that he put it in writing, even though he dropped the thought and continue it, the fact that he put it in writing makes me think that maybe that was a topic of conversation among philosophers. And we just got an extra hint.
One more question.
Thank you for that fabulous presentation. Thank you.
My question is actually, could you give us a few more examples from these
Asia, China, India, etc.
and do they
Precede the examples that developed from Europe and Asia. And are they of the same primarily use of power to exercise tyranny, or do they have other purposes? That's a good question. People ask if maybe Greece was a weak, and I don't think they were. It's just that we have a lot of information, and I particularly I don't study India or China, but I did find examples. And one of my favorites is, you and I were discussing this. There was a legend that comes from India from the time of. We don't know the exact date of this legend. It comes from a text that is the first written text of oral legend. So they could be very old. The text itself is from something like 2nd century BC to the 1st century, or something like that, but the stories are much older. And it's in the language of Burma, Sanskrit, and Chinese. So it's really deep in the East, and it concerns a crew of robotic warriors that defended the relics of Buddha after he died. And according to the story, when Buddha died, his body remains were hidden under a stupa in a secret chamber and guarded by these robot warriors. And they were said to spin so fast that they would chop up anyone who came near them. And these were set in place by King, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, Ajatasattu, and these were to remain in place guarding Buddha's relics until King Ashoka would come and defeat them or disable them somehow and then distribute the relics. Buddha, we know that he did that. So it's a very interesting legend, and in the legend, the plans for the robots came from Alexandria, the Silicon Valley of the West. They were stolen by an engineer in India who traveled there specifically to learn how to make them, and he brought the plans. He somehow either sewed the plans under his skin or tattooed them onto his body. No one's really sure about the translation. And he knew that these robot makers, it's very interesting the way they describe the West. The robot makers are not allowed to reveal their secrets of making robots in the West. They, in fact, there are assassin robots that will chase them down and kill them if they try to tell their secret. So he knew his body would never get back to India, but he told his son where he hid the plans. And sure enough, the robot assassins kill him on the way back to India, and his son brings the plans. So, and it's a very complicated story, but it doesn't really have any tyrants. It's a beneficial use of those robots.
For industrial espionage there. So that's it for the evening. Adrianne is going to be signing her books, and I highly encourage you to read it. It's very entertaining, very illuminating. Also, a lot of details about actual engineering. She touched on